What up, guys? Welcome to the State of the Wild, episode 6, a semi-regular podcast YouTube video web series thingy. So it's been a while since we've done one of these, so just a reminder that we're going to do 3 things in the next 15 minutes. First off, we're going to talk about, you might have guessed it, the wild meta. So what's dominating, how to beat it, and any decks that might be flying underneath the radar. Second off, we're going to talk about any wild news, controversial topics, or maybe the lack thereof. And last but not least, we'll be talking about our decks of the week. A powerful meta deck, one that's being underestimated, and a fun off-meta choice that we've been enjoying. So just before we get started, just a reminder to like, comment, and subscribe if you guys enjoy content like this. And so now you might have noticed that I dropped a lot of wheeze during this opening segment, or you might have noticed this beautiful face below me. But I am joined today by Corbett. Welcome, dude. How are you doing tonight?
Hey, I'm doing great. What's up, Meow? Really happy that I'm getting to do the show with you. Thank you so much for inviting me on. And yeah, it's really looking forward to digging into everything today.
Yeah, so you guys might be wondering why Corbett's on this thing with me. We've got some pretty big news. So I have dropped the ball a little bit on this in the past due to some real life things, even though I really enjoyed doing this. But that was for good reason. We've done a little bit of revamping, and we're excited to say that the State of the Wild is back for, the future, forever. It's back on the schedule, coming to some podcast thingies potentially near you, with the greatest co-host and Wild Hearthstone mind that I know, Corbett, joining me for all of them. Corbett, thank you so much for agreeing to help me look good.
No, it's going to be great. Real looking forward to this. And yeah, just seeing where we go. It should be really fun.
All right, so without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. All right, so a few weeks ago, we got a significant shakeup, right? When we got Warglaives and Metamorphosis getting nerfed for Demon Hunter, and a slight tone down to Corsair Cache in Warrior, right? And so it kind of feels like we've gone backwards in our metagame, back to pre-Ashes of Outland, where Quest Mage was the top dog, the most hated, with a smattering of aggressive decks trying to beat Quest Mage, and then Reno Priest kind of picking on this little, cycle of meta decks in Wild. And so, I mean, first of all, would you kind of agree with that sentiment that we've kind of gone backwards? We had this whole release of Demon Hunter that was super powerful, and before we even realized the power, it got nerfed 4 times, and now it's gone.
Yeah, I definitely agree that it feels like we took that step back. That said, there are a lot of distinct differences between what we have right now and what we had before the expansion. So yeah, it feels like it's a little bit more familiar to what we had previously, but there's still some changes that have happened. But yeah, overall, with the meta being very Quest Mage dominated, obviously, I think that's something that everyone that's been paying attention to Wild is now very familiar with right now.
All right, so,
Yeah.
I mean, let's just talk a little bit about the meta, right, and what we're kind of defining as the meta that we're experiencing, because I know I've personally been hanging around rank 300, rank 500 most of last month in Legend, so not super high Legend, but not like dumpster, right? I feel like my experience might be a little bit more representative of the general population, whereas like your experience is very high Legend. And if for those of you guys that don't know, there's a drastic difference between the two, right? And so I don't know if it might have been a while since you've been down in the 300s, but if you want to talk a little bit about the difference between the two metas of like general ladder experience versus high Legend ladder.
For sure. In Wild, this has been like an ongoing pattern for some time, where what has been seen play at very high ranks is often very different than what is seen play at less high ranks. We can go back to Sniplock, which was a deck that was everywhere and dominated and had like an absurd play rate. But as you dropped off to even Legend, other Legend lower ranks, it wasn't that seen. And then by the time you got to about rank 5, it was basically non-existent. And so there is this big difference. And right now the difference is really Quest Mage play rate, and how that affects the other decks. So yeah, I took the time to go through about 400 replays.
This is some dedication for you guys that aren't familiar with what.
Yeah, I know like we weren't getting a VS report because of the turnaround of how quick the nerfs were happening. So I figured, you know what, why not just kind of do it myself? So I spent a few hours, went through, and I posted the stuff on Twitter, and it just kind of went through just exactly what I was seeing. So the meta was very Quest Mage dominated. It had about 20% Quest Mage play rate, which is actually a little bit higher than I expected. And it is high, but not historically high. There have been a lot of decks in the past that have had even higher play rates. But for Wild specifically, this is pretty. It's an outlier, right? It's very, very high. And then the way it's affected other decks at High Legend has been interesting, where Reno Priest has kind of disappeared largely. And you said yourself, I believe, that you've been seeing some Priest and all that kind of thing.
Yeah, so like I'll put up on the screen right here. So generally, these stats that you've collected about 400 of your own games, right? So this is not,
Yes,
we're
400
not
of my
making any
own
broad
games.
generalizing statements, right? In your
Yeah.
400 games at High Legend, I'd say like rank 50 and above, right? You
Yeah.
queued into 40% Mage and about 15% Warlock and a
Hmm.
crazy 5% of Priest, right?
Yeah.
Which is drastically different than the experience that I was just talking about, where I was like, oh, there's all these aggro decks and then there's a ton of Reno Priests to try to counter them. Like, I have seen in my about 400 games, I've only seen 20% Mage, which is half the amount of Mage that you've been seeing, and I'm sick of Mage,
Yeah.
right? So I can only
Hmm.
imagine kind of what you're feeling like. And then I've seen about 20% Warlock, so just a little bit less Warlock than Mage, but it's kind of crazy because that's all discard Warlock, right? Mainly, at least from my experience, right? I'm not going to go through all the games like you did, but it's a crap ton of discard Warlock trying to counter that Quest Mage. And then I have Priest coming in at about 15%. So it's kind of
Yeah.
drastic, the amount of change that's happened just between like 200 ranks, right?
Right. And it is like I can only talk about my own experiences.
Yeah.
When going through this kind of stuff. Like, this doesn't mean this is what everyone at High Legend is seeing. It's important to note that when I'm playing on ladder, I play at the most like dead time on NA because of the time zone difference.
Yeah.
And so I'm a bit more prone to rematches. That said, it does seem like what I'm saying is something that a lot of other people at the same rank, they're reporting similar stories.
Yeah, and just let's make it clear that we're not making any broad generalizing statements. We're just kind of summarizing
Exactly.
our own personal experiences. And
Mhm.
so I think it's very interesting, the drasticness. And I think a lot of people that are listening in are pretty interested in that. And so I guess the next thing I want to ask a question about is, so in the past in Wild, we've seen these super dominant decks, right? Like we had Naga Giants, we had Starliner Druid, right? We had Snip Snap Warlock for a long time. And we were talking about this a little bit before we started the show. Like this is like let's be real with ourselves, guys. Quest Mage is not nearly as bad, as dominant, or as prevalent as Snip Snap Warlock used to be, right?
Yeah, and when talking about high rank specifically, I think I would agree. Quest Mage to me does seem a lot more similar to Starliner Druid, where it might not have. It's important to distinguish win rate and like dominance in that sense, and like how warping and popular decks are, and often those will like intertwine. But a deck like Starliner, for example, definitely warped the meta. Dirty Rat had an insane play rate at the time. It was definitely the most hated deck in the format, but
Absolutely.
it wasn't the best deck at the time. And I think Quest Mage, people will disagree about this, but I believe Quest Mage is kind of in a similar boat where it's a very strong deck. But because of just how popular it is and how it can be targeted, it's a little different than a deck like Snip Snap, which was both incredibly popular and had basically zero viable counters and was arguably the best deck that we'd ever seen. So it's a kind of a similar story, but not quite the exact same.
Yeah, where I think Snip Snap Warlock, the funniest thing to me during that entire meta game was the fact that Snip Snap's worst matchup was itself, right? Whereas
Yeah.
Quest Mage actually has bad matchups, and
Mhm.
as bad as it might feel like to play against, it's not completely uncounterable, and might be part of the reason that Blizzard is a little bit hesitant to take action, even though the community is an outrage, I guess, like they always are. But
Mhm.
I think
And I
that may
think
be a reason. Yeah.
so. Yeah, I think like part of also the issue with Quest Mage is that even though Quest Mage itself, like 20%, as I said, is a lot. It's not historically high. The important
Yeah.
thing though is that Reno Quest Mage is another 10%. So it's just another like big chunk of games where you're seeing that quest on one, you're seeing like a quest and explorer or adventure on two. It's a very
Yeah.
similar play pattern a lot of the time, and feels like it beats up a lot of the similar stuff. And so yeah, it's just like more. It's just a more repetitive experience. And even though Quest Mage, like you said, like Quest Mage at 20, you know, it's it's like not exactly the highest we've ever seen. But 40% mage as a class, that's a lot. That's a hell of a lot, and it is exactly why a lot of people have had to like take a quick break, like myself included. I've had to take a quick break from the format, just until the expansion drops, which I am excited about for sure.
Yeah. So I guess one last question while we're talking about the meta: would you be confident in saying Quest Mage is the best deck in the format?
I would be confident saying Quest Mage is not the best deck.
Okay, so
The exact
explain
opposite.
yourself. Explain yourself.
Yeah. So when I'm saying best deck, I'm purely talking about win rate, right? Like what deck, if I was going to take something to ladder,
Yeah.
what deck do I think I'm going to win the most with? And some people define best deck as what is having the most influence, right? Like a combination of what's in play and what has the highest win rate.
Making
it's
my
all
whole
about
point for me, man. I was gonna try to make that
Yeah.
point, but you just
But it's very important to clarify this stuff when we use this kind of language, because sometimes people will like have a disagreement, but they're actually talking about two different things. So would I say Quest Mage is the best deck? No. I think that if Quest Mage is 20% of the meta, it's not hard to figure out why a deck like Discard Warlock might be outperforming it, because it's just like a free 20%. It's a dominant deck, and it's just a free one for Warlock to come pick up wins on. And Warlock is still very good in a lot of other matchups. So yeah, I think Discard Warlock is a deck that is a lot better than Quest Mage, even though Quest Mage is having a more influential effect, if that makes sense.
Yeah, you just kind of took my whole point, man. But yeah, so let's talk a little bit about Discard Warlock, right? I think it's safe to say we've seen a huge increase in the amount of people playing Discard Warlock, and I think a little bit of that is a combination of people like learning how to play the deck, and a lot of people gravitating towards it because of the nerfs to Demon Hunter and Pirate Warrior. And while those two are still very, very strong decks on their own, I think a lot of people see these nerfs to Demon Hunter and just kind of like abandon the class and abandon the deck and have gravitated towards Discard Warlock, which is fine, right? I think the biggest thing for me has been the performance of the deck. The fact that as it's become more popular and as people learn how to mulligan against it and start mulliganing for it instead of like Q-Block, for example, the win rate doesn't seem to be like dropping anything. It still looks impressive, and the more I play against it, the scarier it looks. So what are your initial thoughts about Discard Warlock? Is it a fad, or is it here to stay?
Oh, it's here. Yeah, Discard Warlock was, I think after the nerfs, it can be very difficult to predict what's going to happen. But Discard Warlock becoming one of the best decks was something I repeated a lot on stream, and it was something I was very confident in. Just because like it was very strong overall, and it didn't have many counters.
Yeah.
Except it did like slightly lose to Demon Hunter and Pirate Warrior. And even if those decks are still good, after decks get nerfed, they see a drop in play rate. Like it just happens.
It's natural, yeah.
Yeah, at least for the short term. And so, yeah, Discard Warlock is definitely a real deck. It's something that's going to be sticking around for a long time. The amount of mana cheating and the aggressive starts that it has and the high roll potential, it's very difficult to counter. And a big part as well at High Legend that's really boosting the performance is the fact that Quest Mage is currently pushing out Discard Warlock's best counter, which is Reno Priest.
Reno Priest, yeah.
Exactly. So, like, Discard Warlock has has a lot of matchups that don't deviate very far from 50%, because of just how much it can high roll, right? It's hard to consistently beat Discard Warlock no matter what you do. It's like a big deck in that way.
Yeah, if they have Hand of Gul'dan in their opener, you're probably not winning that game.
If they cheat at Silverware Golem on 1 or 2, then like, what are you going to do? And yeah, Reno Priest is the only really clear counter. So yeah, Discard Warlock has been very impressive. There's a lot of variations and a lot of testing going on right now. And so I think the last couple of slots are a little bit up in the air, but it's still been performing like very, very admirably, and doesn't seem like it's going to go away anytime soon.
Yeah, so for those of you guys that don't know too much about Discard Warlock, I feel like 27, 28 of the cards are pretty core, and a lot of people are messing around with Darkglare in that deck. Darkshire Librarians, which is like what was traditionally in there. People have been messing with Zeph. Lothebs as well have made their way in. There's a lot of experimentation, which is kind of interesting to see that it's having this big of an impact without like a totally refined list. But yeah, I think like you said, I think Discard Warlock's here to stay, and I think it's a very cheap deck as well. I think there's only 2 legendaries that are core to the deck, and so if you're looking to get into Wild or looking for a new deck to pick up, I think Discard Warlock's a very, very strong one, even moving into a new meta. But speaking of that, I don't want to dwell too much on this because we are getting a new expansion soon, so I want to talk a little bit about that and how it may or may not shake things up. But one last question about the meta. Did you enjoy the metas that we had in Ashes of Outland? I know you were a big Demon Hunter fan, or maybe one of the specific pocket metas that we had because we had so many nerfs and changes. Did you have one, or did you at least have a favorite deck in Ashes of Outland?
I would say I did not have the best time in this expansion. I think before there was it's hard to even keep track of exactly what the meta was because we got so many updates. Yeah, it's hard exactly to pinpoint. Wait, did I like this exact patch, or what about the patch after that? But yeah, I would say as the whole, it wasn't one of my favorite expansions. The favorite deck that I genuinely did have a really good time with Odd Demon Hunter and kind of figuring out that. And that's very much tied into the nerfs. Yeah, aggro player. But that's very much tied into the nerfs, right? Is that it kind of kept on presenting itself as a little bit of a puzzle, just trying to get the build right. But yeah, I'd say overall, I really did enjoy Demon Hunter. I really enjoyed Reno Galaxy Mage. That was one of the most fun decks I'd played in some time.
So this is pre-nerf Dragoncaster, right?
Yes, pre-nerf Dragoncaster. And, I do love playing Quest Mage and all that kind of stuff. So hate me for that. I still.
For those of you that are only listening, I'm throwing up right now.
Yeah, I'm not going to defend it, but I'm just going to say I enjoyed it. But yeah, overall, I'd say the general thing with this meta was that it was very polarizing. That's like the important thing to take away.
Yeah.
It was very, very polarizing and based on what you queued into. And even the decks that weren't that polarizing, like Pirate Warrior, a lot of the time it was dependent on, hey, did they draw the Reno Jackson? So a lot of the aggressive decks were, they had that problem. And a lot of other decks had the polarizing problem, which was largely derived because of Quest Mage.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the new decks that popped up had the very similar, like the new Malaga's Druid that popped up, right? Mm-hmm. And the Odd Warrior had its time where like it was super popular for a couple weeks as like an attempted counter to
Mechathon is another one that was very, very polarizing.
Dude, Hemet on 5, like Dryas, I had nightmares about that. All right, but I don't know about you, but I think my favorite part of Ashes of Outland was I'm this kind of like mad genius when it comes to deck building in Wild. If you guys don't know, I love finding like these really, really cool cards that have super unique effects and trying to break them in Wild. And I had this period at the very beginning of the expansion where I had like 2 weeks where I played nothing but Dark Glare, like self-damage Zoolock. And that was it was like constant tuning and fine-tuning and finding these really jank cards that somehow fit together. I think that's my favorite memory of this expansion. I'm not going to miss all the Mechathon Warlock and Quest Mage and Reno Priest. Like, I am going to forget those as fast as I can. But yeah, I think Ashes of Outland was not my favorite expansion in Wild, but I do think that there were some pretty big hits. Like, I personally am a fan of Demon Hunter in Wild, right? I'm always a fan of these strong, aggressive decks that can keep combo in check, and I think Demon Hunter was one of those. And it had a pretty unique play pattern, I think, to a lot of the other aggressive decks we had seen previously. Right.
Absolutely. Something like Demon Hunter in the mirror was a very, very weird aggressive matchup, and I talked about.
I played that mirror so wrong until I watched your stream. Yeah.
Yeah, it was really fun figuring that out, and it like right up until it got nerfed, people were still kind of making mistakes, and so the fact that an aggro deck could have, or a Baku deck, could have that kind of sort of interesting play pattern, that was really weird and something that I did enjoy.
But yeah, I mean. I'm happy to say goodbye to the Ashes of Outland meta and ready to talk about our new expansion. So let's go ahead and move on to part 2. So obviously, we have an expansion coming this week. If you guys don't know, you've been living under a rock, and what are you doing? But I just want to go ahead and touch on something because myself and a lot of people in Twitch chat, I know probably in yours too, have had this sentiment where like, oh, there's a ton of cool cards, but you're still going to lose to Quest Mage, right? And people are probably not going to enjoy the expansion of Quest Mage is still tier 1. And I just want to put this out there that Blizzard is paying attention to Wild. And before you guys meme on me, somebody specifically asked Cora, who is now on the Blizzard design team, right? If you guys don't know Cora, she's an awesome person. And talking about Sorcerer's Apprentice in Wild, right? Because they printed this new card to enable Exodia Mage in Standard. And so they're talking about Quest Mage still is on their radar. They've hit open the Waygate, and they're still very aware that it's a volatile situation, and some of the new cards can make playing against Quest Mage very unfun, right? Essentially. And she goes on in a couple of our other tweets talking about they're always paying attention to wild, even if they don't change anything, for a variety of situations, right? So just putting it out there, they are paying attention. I know this is about to get memed because they're always paying attention. It's always on their radar. But, I mean, I have a lot more respect than I think. They make changes, right? And so if it's on the radar and they already know that it might be a problem. And so I just want to put that out there, right? Quest Mage hopefully won't be, 30% of the meta again, right? 20% of the meta moving into the next expansion. But screw all that. Let's talk about the new expansion. I'm super hype about it. I know both of us have been looking at a ton of cards and theory crafting a ton. I know both of us did a theory crafting stream on Friday. If you guys haven't checked it out, it was a lot of fun. We built a lot of the new meta decks. And that'll be over on Twitch. And I know I'm posting my theory craft videos on YouTube, and I know you're going to be posting one as well once you finish everything up. And so if you guys aren't following Corbett on YouTube, make sure that you guys do. It's the same thing down there. And so instead of reviewing cards, I think let's just go ahead and kind of do a top 5 summary list, if that's all right with you. And so what do you think are, and this is completely subjective without us actually playing anything, right? But that's part of the fun about it. What do you think are the top 5 powerful cards in this upcoming set when it comes to Wild?
Yeah, I think it's hard to go past Tour Guide as number 1 or in that conversation. Tour Guide is so broken in the Baku decks. It's obviously a card that is designed, or at least primarily, in Standard, they don't have to deal with this. So in Wild, it's a little bit different. In Odd Paladin, this card is nuts. Being able to open up with 1-drop here and then Hero Power immediately, it's kind of nutty. You can also not Hero Power if you want to save into AoE and make a bigger swing turn later. But yeah, Tour Guide, super high tempo. It's probably going to be the highest drawn win rate card in Odd Paladin, along with Quartermaster and Muster maybe. So those would be the top 3 cards in Odd Paladin. Yeah. So yeah, it should get a big boost. What else do we have? Let's see, Lightning Bloom. It's another one. Lightning Bloom is really nutty in terms of the combo that it can activate. All the big Shaman stuff.
Yeah, Lightning Bloom is number 6 on mine, which means I might be underestimating it. But
yeah, Lightning Bloom is a card that I think people might be overrating in some decks, in some lists.
So you're arguing that it's not an auto-include in every Druid and Shaman deck, right?
Exactly, yeah. I don't even know if I really want this in even Shaman. I think people are reading this as Innovate, and they should be looking at that Overload too, and really paying attention to that, because Overload matters. It's not... It's like a credit card, right? You don't just get it for free. You do have to pay for this at some point. And so, I think that Lightning Bloom is going to be very, very strong in decks that want to just make it to one specific turn, just make one swing, like Big Shaman, right? Once you get that big guy on the board, does it really matter if you're only have a couple mana the next turn? Not really. Yeah. Or a thing with Malagos Druid, right? Does Overload matter if the opponent's dead? No. So yeah, but that card's really, really strong as well. All right, Secret Passage, 1 mana, draw 5, seems good.
3 copies of Myra and Rogue seems strong.
Yeah, really, really powerful. And the fact that, this is a quick thing in case people didn't know, I know there's been some confusion. If you generate or draw cards with the cards that you get to keep those. So if you play a Grey Sage and you draw 2, that's not getting shuffled in at the end of the turn. So yeah, the card's really, really strong, and suits Rogue. Very aggressive Rogue lists really well.
Did they ever say how Secret Passage into Secret Passage works? Has that ever been confirmed?
No, I haven't seen it on stream either. I think Trump had the chance to do it, but he pussied out. He can't. He dodged it because he was I'm trying to win here.
Yeah.
So yeah, chickened out.
For science, come on, Trump. Of all people to do things for science, come on.
Exactly, that's what I would have thought. But yeah, it's another really good one. Speaking of drawing a ton of cards, Voracious Reader, the 2 mana Jeeves. I think this card is another really insane one for aggressive decks. And just pushes things like Aggro Druid, pushes things like Kingsbane Rogue maybe, and other aggressive lists in general. Jeeves is a card that's okay at 4, and being able to just get a 2 mana discount, and it's one-sided, and you only lose 1 health. This card is just nuts.
I don't understand why this is 2 mana. It blows my mind whenever I
think I don't understand, and trailing off seems like the perfect summary of this card. I wouldn't change that.
I feel that. Yes, I feel that.
And the last one, and Meowth, I'm sure you'll love this after all the Dark Lair discussion earlier. Raise Dead. Raise Dead is the Warlock Yeah. It's perfect with Darkglare. It's
Yeah.
like the ideal card.
Yeah, I've been looking at it in a lot of other decks other than just Dark. Like it's perfect in Darkglare, but I've also been like, how can I break this in something like Evenlock, or can you break this in Priest with like Dead Ringer, Loot Hoarder, Blood Mage Thalnos kind of shenanigans like that?
Mm-hmm.
That card
Yeah,
just seems like it's gonna be
very
dumb.
for sure. It does seem like a card that can just slot into hold a bunch of different lists and different roles. But yeah, I think like Darkglare specifically is the best home. Being able to have like the immediate discount for 0 mana means that you can Darkglare on 3, which wasn't really an option previously, unless you had like a Wrathguard on board or something. So yeah, this card seems nuts, and yeah, a lot of aggressive cards from this list.
Yeah, I
on my
mean,
most powerful 5.
so like for my top 5, I swear we like wrote these like we didn't talk about this before we came onto the show, but my top 5, I have Voracious Reader, Tour Guide, Secret Passage as well. But then you can see sort of like the jank player in me for my other 2. I have Devout People up there. The Thing from Below for Paladin, with the Librams. The fact that it's a 0 mana 4/5 taunt with Divine Shield just seems kind of nutty in that deck. I think it's going a little bit under the radar because Paladin kind of sucks, right? In Wild, like the Libra Paladin's not the most hype deck, I think. But I think this is a huge buff to it, and like on its own is a very very powerful card. And for me, I also had Mind Reader or Mind Render or Lucy up there. I know we've talked about this a little bit where we think that it is overhyped by the community. I think people are overreacting to it, but it is a very very strong disruption tool. I think without a doubt, like it's a better Dirty Rat for Reno Priest, right? And Dirty Rat's like a very very good card when it comes to combo disruption. And so while I think the card is being overhyped, I also think it's a very, very good card. It helps Reno Priest in a lot of its bad matchups. It doesn't make it an auto win in those bad matchups, but it is very, very good in those matchups. And I think it's going to be an auto include in Reno Priest for a very, very long time to come. So I think I had 3 out of the same 5 as you.
Yeah.
So when it comes to the powerful cards, okay.
Great minds, right?
Yeah, exactly. Power aside, though, what are your top 5 most exciting cards, right? Maybe not something that's the most insane power level that's going to try to break the format, but something that you're like genuinely looking forward to playing just because it looks like a super fun interaction or a super fun card.
So the first one is like Guardian Animals.
Yeah,
this card is also very. What was that, sir?
I had that on my list as well.
Okay, yeah. This card is very, very powerful, but it also seems like a lot of fun and a very different direction than what Druid has been kind of pushing in Wild for some time. Being able to kind of do mid-rangey stuff in Druid would be really cool. A lot of people seem very hyped on it for Standard after seeing... Right. What was that?
Mid-rangey with the quotes, the air quotes around mid-range.
Mid-rangey, yeah. A lot of people have seen the reveal streams, I think, for Standard and have probably been pretty impressed with this card. But yeah, really looking forward to this one, along with some of the support it got.
Yeah.
What else?
I think you also need to pay attention to it in Hunter, right? Don't sleep on the Hunter.
Well,
with stuff like, I mean, it's Hunter, right? So like, obviously, it's going to be worse than the shenanigans you're doing at Druid. But I think Hunter, when it comes to Beast and stuff like, I'm just thinking like build me a Knuckles Hunter that's competitive, because like that would be the sickest thing ever. and Guardian Project feels great in attack, right?
Yeah, I'm sure Dylan will have a lot of fun with this card and the Knuckles stuff.
All right, sorry to interrupt you. Keep going.
No, you're good. Next up, I had Lord Barov. Dead Man's Hand. Yeah, Dead Man's Hand was a deck that I really, really had a ton of fun with. Over the past like month or so. And so this card actually feels like a really important role in Dead Man's Hand, where you can just go like this guy into like Risky Skipper and then another 1-drop, and you have like a full board clear while still developing. It can also just be played sort of for tempo on itself a little bit. Yeah, it just seems really strong and feels like an important role as a 3-mana thing that's very dumpable compared to something like Brawl. Like Brawl and Plague of Death can be very clunky in that list.
Yeah.
And so yeah, looking forward to being able to play this in Dead Man's Hand.
Do you predict? I'm gonna do the dreaded thing. Do you make a prediction? Okay. Do you think that this helps push Dead Man's Hand into like actual meta play, or do you think Dead Man's Hand's like too big brain for?
I think it's probably a deck that won't no matter how good it is, I don't think it would see that much play. But no, I don't think this. Like,
It doesn't
I
solve the
still
problems
think
in
it'll
Dead
be.
Man's Hand? Okay.
Yeah, I still think it'll be Dead Man's Hand.
Yeah.
I don't think it'll be very
Okay.
good. Yeah. Next up, I had First Day of School. I know this card might look a little boring, but I think it offers a whole bunch of really cool like deck building possibilities.
Prismatic
so I
Lens. Woo.
Yeah, with Prismatic Lens, you can get that zero cost minion. So it's really exciting with like a big Paladin list, which did get some support this expansion.
Yep.
And I also like it in this things like hand buff Paladin or even like even Paladin or Call to Arms Paladin.
Okay.
You want to play it in like you don't really want to play that many 1-drops, but because the Call to Arms, but you still want to be able to develop on one. I think this card is like it's kind of like Firefly, like obviously in how it looks and what it does, but it's also like Firefly in that it opens up a lot of really subtle deck building possibilities and stuff. And so
Firefly with
like
higher
cards,
ceiling, you think maybe?
yeah. So I'm really excited to play this for sure in Paladin lists, and think it opens up a lot.
Okay.
Let's see. Second from last, let's see, Flesh Giant. Flesh Giant's really sweet. Yeah, it's probably the most terrifying Hearthstone card I think I've ever seen in my life.
Like the art. If you guys ever look at the art on this card, it is the creepiest thing. Like it
is just like Lovecraft, like pure nightmare fuel.
Oh god.
Imagine like if this was this is like the Harry Potter in the dungeon. Yes. This is like the troll version of Scholomance Academy, I think. It's truly terrifying. But yeah, really excited for this one in Evenlock and just other like I played a lot of Miracle Priest type stuff there for a long time, and maybe I can try that card and like something like that. Could be really fun. And last one I had was Gibberling or Gibberling. I don't know how to say that. The 1-mana 1/1 spell burst. I just think it's going to be sort of disgusting. Some of the openers that you can pull off with this card. And it could make for a sweet screenshot or a highlight.
Dude, I was super low on this card. I was like, it's just a 1-mana 1/1. It's like a meme of like the original Gibberer, right? Like, there's no way this card's good. And then I like watched a little bit of the standard reveal stream, and it was like turn 2, and there's like 7 3/3s on the board, and you're just like, okay, yeah, all right. Yeah, I totally underrated that one. That one's on me. But
definitely looking forward to the aggro druid stuff, along with the other like Reader, which I mentioned previously, as one of my.
Can you guys tell the Corbett's an aggro player, by the way? Can you guys tell yet?
Yeah, aggro and combo 1-trick, 2-trick, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I actually had. This is how you can tell Corbett and I are like very different players. I had a completely different list when it came to favorite cards. So on my list, I had Lordkeeper Polkit, the one that like rearranges your deck. Just because for me, a lot of the fun comes in deck building for me when it comes to Hearthstone, especially in Wild Hearthstone. And I feel like even if Polkit ends up not being good, the fact that Polkit exists really forces you to think about your deck building and like stuff like that, right? So like rebuilding Reno Priest, for example, I know a lot of people are like on that train, but I'm sure like optimizing stuff like Shutterwalk Shaman, or maybe there's other decks that just like haven't been thought about that Polkit fits really nicely to. And so like that's kind of why I'm a little bit hyped to mess around with Polkit, not more about the play pattern of the card and more of the deck building kind of homework behind it. Sphere of Sapience for me, I think that's just a really good card for like control combo style decks if you can afford the card slot. Just like for like big decks, for example, putting the big minions to the bottom of your deck so that you don't draw them, right? I think is maybe relevant. I don't know. I think whether it's worth the card slot's an argument for another time. But I'm also like, I love my Reno decks, and Reno decks are already super inconsistent because they're singleton decks, and any ability to make it more consistent, I think, is welcome. And Sphere of Sapience kind of does that. So I'm
sure a lot of Magic players are really looking forward to this one.
Yeah, I mean, it's only 4 scries, which kind of feels a little bit bad, but it's still like it's an ability that we've not had before outside of like the 2-mana 3/2 Demon Hunter card, right? So I'm just excited to mess around with it in Hearthstone and see how much of an impact it actually makes. And then I'm actually really excited for Secret Passage. Like, I loved Kingsbane Rogue. I played I had a month where I played almost 1,000 games at Kingsman Rogue across NA and EU in 1 month. When Kohai originally built the list, and so I love Secret Passage. I love Kingsman Rogue. I want to get in as many games as I can with that deck before Secret Passage potentially gets nerfed because it looks kind of bonkers, right?
Yeah.
Same thing with Devout People. Librarian Paladin's been one of my pet decks. I've loved playing it, and Devout People is just like an awesome inclusion in that. So I'm really excited, looking forward to playing that. And then I'm going to cheat a little bit and include both Flesh Giant and Raised Dead together in like a little package because they go so nicely together. In Darkler, Warlock, and Even Luck, just super exciting cards, right? Okay.
Yeah. I tried to keep the list a little separate, but yeah, Passage and Raised Dead are definitely two cards that I'm super hyped about.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, I had a little bit of overlap on mine. All right, but last but not least, one question for this section. What deck are you the most excited to play on Expansion Day? If you had to pick one deck, what is it going to be?
Probably Kingsman Rogue, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Darkler is so close as the second place. But yeah, those two for sure.
Yeah, if it makes you feel better, Darkler Warlock's my number one deck. I'm going to be jamming that for hours and hours. I love that deck. Okay. And so now for the points, we're going to make a point about pointless predictions. This is completely speculation. We have no evidence, right? Shout out Surfriend Line, who's going to call us out on this. But what do you think the impact that this expansion might have on Wild, right? It looks pretty insane, right? Lots of powerful cards, unique effects. Do you think this expansion is going to be good for the Wild format?
I think that this expansion won't push many new archetypes, but I do think like a lot of the similar archetypes get quite a bit better. I think like the overall thing is the format's going to get so fast. Like, I don't know if people realize just how fast the format is about to get. With cards like Rita, with even like things like Tool Guard and Odd Paladin, with Lightning Bloom in the combo list.
Secret Passage, yeah.
Yeah, Secret Passage as well. Like the format's about to speed up a ton. Which, maybe some people will like that, maybe others not so much. But yeah, we'll see how that goes. I do think this will be one of the more impactful expansions in terms of like card play rate. Yeah. Especially at least like of the modern-ish era. So yeah, should have a pretty big shakeup. Even if the decks themselves aren't completely new, there are going to be new takes on stuff.
Yeah, for sure. So let's go ahead and move on to part 3, our decks of the week. So in this section, we talk about a top meta deck, an under-the-radar deck that we think is going to be sneaky good in the current meta, or a current meta deck with some under-the-radar tech that'll help you gain a slight edge. And last but not least, we'll talk about a meme deck or a kind of completely off-meta deck that we've been messing around with for those of you guys that aren't super into tryharding Legend Ladder or are looking for a break during your climb. So I think for the meta deck, I would be amiss if I didn't kind of yield the floor to the top 50 Legend player over here in Corbett. So if you want to talk about your kind of top meta deck of the week.
Yeah, I think I'll highlight Big Shaman. The reason I want to highlight Big Shaman is that it seems like it's a little bit underplayed right now from what I've seen.
Okay.
Relative to how well it's performing. I really do think it's one of the better decks and definitely like a tier 1 archetype right now. And it doesn't seem like there's that much talk about it from what I've seen.
All right, so like, why do you think that it's being slept on?
I'm not sure actually, like why people don't want to play it. I think like what people take to ladder is always a combination of what they think is strong and what they like playing. And sometimes what they think is strong doesn't match up with what is strong. And sometimes what they like playing just aren't the best decks, which happens to things like Odd Paladin, right?
That's me, bro. That's me.
Yeah. So yeah, Big Shaman is a deck that has very, very, very like, it doesn't really have bad matchups. Like it has like Reno Priest, and that's kind of just it. Quite similar to what I was saying about Discard Warlock. The deck doesn't deviate very far from 50%, and a large part of that is because of how much it can just tie roll. And just like the nature of what this deck can do. It can handle aggressive decks really well with its like healing and the AoE and all the taunts and stuff. And it can slap down slow lists as well. It's just like very, very even keeled overall. And it's definitely like one of the like top performing lists that is getting a big boost next expansion. So if you want to get the head start on it, you want to start building towards it and play it and get some practice in before the expansion drops. Yeah, definitely give Big Shaman a shot.
I think the only thing that might be a little bit different than some of the lists that I've seen on ladder is that you're running double Vivid Spores. I think I've seen a couple lists running like one copy of Reincarnate to play around polymorph effects. What is your idea on that card? Just unnecessary, you think?
Yeah, Reincarnate doesn't look particularly good from what I've seen. Vivid isn't either. Like, Vivid isn't very strong either.
Yeah.
Vivid and the Colossus, and then Healing Rain, arguably. Like, those two, and then...
Let's specify Colossus of the Moon, right? Not Scrapyard.
Yeah, Colossus of the Moon, sorry. Those are definitely, like, the weakest cards in the list. And they're the most room that Big Shaman has to improve as we head into the next expansion. And so it's very much like whatever you prefer. If you want to play, like, Colossus Ancestral, or if you want to just maintain this current stock list from Hegio. Either way, you should have success with it, and it'll be a good time for you.
Yeah, so if you guys enjoy playing big decks, and you cannot lie, this is your deck. All right, guys, this is a very, very strong deck to take to ladder. And I think it's had a lot of success. I think I've seen a lot of people climbing with this deck very successfully. But yeah, so let's move on to our off-meta deck, or kind of tech meta deck. So for this one, I know we're at the end of an expansion, but I think that's even more reason to highlight this next deck. So we're going to talk a little bit about Even Shaman. If you guys have been listening, you know this is kind of like, for some reason I have an attraction to this deck, but it's kind of insane. So this is a list that came out of China, I think, just a couple weeks ago, right? So Even Shaman's been around for how long now? Over 2 years? And we're still seeing innovation with the list, right? We saw Splitting X come about 6 months ago, right? And now we've got this new inclusion in Hench Clan Hag. I don't love Hench Clan Hag, and the whole reason it's included is kind of if your opponents are able to fight for board with you, right, and clear your totems, it's really hard to snowball something like Totemic Might, Totemic Surge, and Splitting Axe. And so what you do is, this is 2 totems in a card, right? So you go Hench Clan Hag, Hero Power, Surge, and Might, right? And all of a sudden you've got this really intimidating board, right? So that's kind of the argument behind Hench Clan Hag. And so I've been playing a bit with it. I think this is a little bit of a wonky. I'm running one Nerubian Unraveler. There's like one little tech slot that you can still mess around with. You can run Crawler, you can run Cryostasis, you can run Nerebar Weblord, whatever the name of that card is, right? The 2-mana 1/4. You've got some options in that last slot. And then you're running the Hench Clan Hags over like the Squall Hunters, for example, right? So this is nothing insane. I've actually really been enjoying some Even Shaman just because it feels like it has game against Quest Mage and Discard Warlock. Yeah, you kind of auto-lose against Reno Priest, but if Discard Warlock and Quest Mage are really popular, right, as you climb up the ladder, Even Shaman might be an option for you, and this is just kind of a really unique take on the list, which kind of highlights, like, Wild has never done innovating, man. Like, we're in Eternal format, these decks can be around forever, and there's still a lot to brew and discover.
For sure. Those last few slots have seen, like you're saying, a lot of experimentation. Like Cryostasis has been something I've been playing. Another thing that came out of a Chinese meta report. You can always run the stock like Vicina and like extra Squall Hunter, but it is interesting to see something like the Hench Clan Hag in those last few slots, and just seeing the way people are trying to figure it out and teching up to whatever is like the current top dog.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. I never thought I would ever see Hench Clan Hag in a deck on purpose, you know? And it's just kind of crazy we're getting to that point with synergies where like they're that important, which is cool. All right, and so last but not least, we've got our meme deck of the week, and this one actually came out of a deck request on my stream. This is a really, really cool Egg Paladin list. So this is very similar in style to the standard kind of Kangor's Mech Paladin. That's all a lot of play in standard. But it's been kind of adapted to Wild, where you've got the Libram package to buff your eggs, as well as like a Spike Ridge Steed with the Linus. So it's like a fuse of this Egg Paladin, Q Paladin, with a Meat Wagon, and then some Librams. It's a really janky list, but somehow I went 5-2 with it in Legend, and it was some of the most fun I've ever had playing Paladin, because Paladin to me is like normally this pretty linear, straightforward class, and this one felt a lot of fun to play. And yeah, I don't know. Have you thought about taking
I haven't played anything like this, but this is actually very interesting. The way that I'm just like getting a good look at this list now. It looks fun. Like, I like the way it's built, and yeah, I definitely try this out.
Yeah, it's a little bit light on the early game, right? I do want to try to fit in some Righteous Protectors potentially, but like Christology into Meat Wagon, pulling a Mechanawag, and
Yeah.
then immediately buffing it is like insane, and it's been awesome. But yeah, if you're looking for something fun to mess around with before the new expansion, definitely check this one out. This one's out. I give credit to Bean Overload for the main idea for this deck. But yeah, I mean, tons of fun decks out there. But yeah, I think that's it. This went a little bit longer, but I think it was pretty awesome. And we'll be doing these episodes fairly regularly with new decks and news every episode. And so, Corbett, thank you for joining me. How did you enjoy the first episode?
Oh, it was great. Thank you so much for having me on me out. And the fact that we are going to be able to do this is really exciting. Really looking forward to the next week. Looking forward to the expansion, all that kind of stuff. You said there are a lot of exciting decks out there. Well, we're going to have more in about like 5 or 6 days from now.
Yeah.
So yeah, looking forward to it. It's going to be great.
Yeah, so let the people know where they can find you.
Over on Twitch, you guys can find me like Twitch, Twitter, YouTube, all under the name CorbettGames. So it's CorbettGames. Just check me out wherever you want to find my content.
Yeah, so make sure you guys check out both of our YouTube channels, our Twitters, and maybe most importantly our Twitch channels. I think we're both super excited to stream some of the content for the new expansion. And yeah, if you guys are looking for deck lists or anything like that we talked about today, they'll be down below in the description. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Stay safe out there, and we'll see you guys next time. Take care.
Bye, guys.